just better like me. She says, I'll show you something that will set you free, set you free. She says, howl at the wind, cry on the shoulder of the road. Oh, you can come on over.
Yeah, welcome to Good Morning Pittsfield here on the Brave FM 89.7 WTBR FM Pittsfield. You're also watching us on Access Pittsfield Channel 16, a service of PCTV. I'm Sean Sayre filling in for John Kroll, who has a function with the Berkshire Compact for Education this morning, and so he'll be back on the show tomorrow morning. But in the meantime, we do have a great show in store for you here this morning. We're going to be speaking with BMC's Dr. Brenda Butler. She has an upcoming conference entitled Building Resilience and Protective Factors for the Youth in Our Community. That's happening on February 1st at the Pittsfield Country Club. So in the 7:30 hour, we'll be speaking with her about that. And then at the 8 o'clock hour, we'll be speaking with Jen Smith from the Berkshire Eagle. So a jam-packed show here for this morning. Stick around. First, the news.
WTBR News.
With the support of the Berkshire Eagle. Well, 6 candidates are in the running for the city's next school superintendent. The superintendent screening committee has selected 6 semifinalists who will be invited for interviews next week. The ad hoc panel's selections came from a pool of 18 candidates during a closed-door session on Tuesday night. Quote, we didn't have a set number of candidates to choose, according to committee chairwoman Kathleen Amuso. But she said, I think these 6 are the only ones we really want to interview. The 9-member committee will also meet in executive session on January 16th and 17th and interview 3 superintendent hopefuls each night. Under the state's open meeting law, only the finalists' names are made public. Finalists will be questioned in an open session of the Pittsfield School Committee. The screening committee plans to submit a list of at least 3 finalists to the school committee on January 23rd. Amusa said her group has a strong field of candidates from which to choose. At least one is a finalist for another school superintendent's position. Quote, the screening committee is very pleased with the applicants we have this time, she said. It's early in the year, so people looking to be a superintendent are the cream of the crop, she said. Pittsfield's initial superintendent search was conducted last spring, well after nearly 45 school districts in Massachusetts were in the midst of or had completed their own searches. The school committee opted to start the search over again when it yielded only one finalist in May. Well, the Governor's Council has scheduled a hearing early next month in Boston to consider the nomination of a Pittsfield attorney for an associate justice position at Southern Berkshire District Court. Michael J. McCarthy, a former Pittsfield City solicitor and assistant district attorney in Berkshire County, was renominated by Governor Deval Patrick last week. McCarthy's original nomination to the judge's post in Great Barrington was quashed in September. The Governor's Council failed to confirm him after a 3-3 vote. Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray, who could have broken the tie, was out of the country on a trade mission and not available to cast a deciding vote. This year, the 8-member Governor's Council, which reviews and confirms gubernatorial nominations for the court, along with other duties, has 4 new members as a result of the November election. The council will meet on McCarthy's nomination February 6th at 12:30 p.m. in Boston. Following a hearing on the nomination, the council normally announces its decision 1 week later. Michael J. Albano of Longmeadow, who now represents the Western Massachusetts District 8 on the council, was elected on November 6th and said he will support McCarthy's nomination. Well, from the Berkshires to Boston, households struggling to pay their energy bills this winter can now access the Massachusetts Good Neighbor Energy Fund. The fund provides a $350 stipend to income-eligible individuals and families during the heating season. Organizers say they hope to dole out a total of $650,000 to more than 2,000 households across the state. Quote, without assistance from the fund, many of the people who we serve wouldn't be able to make their monthly utility payments, said Major David E. Kelly, the divisional commander of the Massachusetts Salvation Army, which administers the fund. Local residents can apply to the fund through the Salvation Army Corps on West Street in Pittsfield and River Street in North Adams. The application process officially began Wednesday, according to Salvation Army officials. Quote, people start inquiring in September, said Major Ralph Hansen, commander of the North Adams Salvation Army Corps. I expect the numbers will be higher this year, he said. In fact, they get higher every year. The Energy Assistance Program is funded through Western Mass Electric Company, National Grid, Berkshire Gas Company, and other participating utilities. Utility customers can donate to the fund when paying their monthly bill online at magoodneighbor.org or by calling 1-800-SAL-ARMY. Retired TV personality Gene Shalit's misdemeanor charge of operating negligently to endanger after he drove his car into a utility pole and up against a Housatonic Street residence in Lenox on October 21st has been continued until April 2nd, when it will be dismissed. The agreement between Police Chief Stephen O'Brien and Shalit's attorney Leonard H. Cohen was reached and approved during a magistrate's hearing to determine probable cause regarding the charges. Clerk Magistrate Thomas Bartini presided at Southern Berkshire District Court in Great Barrington on Wednesday afternoon. The chief acknowledged that for the charges to be dismissed, Shalit will have to abide by the safety condition attached to the agreement. Describing Shalit's demeanor during the court appearance, O'Brien said that he was, quote, very appropriately concerned about the incident and very remorseful that it occurred. He understood an error was made. At the closed-door court hearing, Shalit, who's 86, indicated that he will have someone else drive him until April 2nd, Cohen told the Eagle. After that time, his driving status, quote, will have to be addressed, said Cohen, adding the Stockbridge resident's license has not been revoked or suspended. And no one was elected to the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame this year in Cooperstown. When voters closed the doors to Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and Sammy Sosa, they also shut out everybody else. For only the second time in 4 decades, baseball writers failed to give any player the 75% required for induction to Cooperstown, sending a powerful signal that stars of the steroids era will be held to a different standard. All the awards and accomplishments collected over the long careers by Bonds, Clemens, and Sosa could not offset suspicions those feats were boosted by performance-enhancing drugs. Voters also denied entry Wednesday to fellow newcomers Craig Biggio, Mike Piazza, and Curt Schilling, along with holdovers Jack Morris, Jeff Bagwell, and Lee Smith. So another year goes by, and we will not see any Hall of Famers coming from that era of baseball, apparently. All right. For more information on any of the stories you've seen there, you can visit BerkshireEagle.com. In the weather center today, sunny with a high near 38. Nice clear day for January 10th. And then tonight, mostly clear, a low around 15. Tomorrow, Friday, a chance of rain, freezing rain and sleet in the morning, and then just a chance of rain later on. Mostly cloudy with a high near 39. Chance of precip tomorrow is 40%. All right. Dr. Brenda Butler joins us in Good Morning Pittsfield's Nook here when our program begins, which is right now. Welcome back to Good Morning Pittsfield here on the Brave FM 89.7 WTBR FM Pittsfield. You're also watching us on Access Pittsfield Channel 16, a service of PCTV. And I'm your host for today, Sean Sayre, filling in for John Kroll. And with us here we have Dr. Brenda Butler from BMC. Good morning, Dr. Butler. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you bet. And I will get your camera on there. There we go. How about that? For the radio listeners, that's fantastic when they hear me talking about the cameras. So good morning. Welcome to the show, and we appreciate you being here. So you have a conference coming up. That is... Hello. There we go. Yeah, I'm just, I'm a little rusty here today. I haven't been here in a while. Your conference is called Building Resilience and Protective Factors for the Youth in Our Community. That sounds like a mouthful. So I want to know all about it. It's happening on February 1st at Pittsfield Country Club in Pittsfield, right on Route 7. So tell us what the conference is all about.
Okay, so the conference came from a coalition, a group of individuals who have been meeting together for a number of years, including folks from Berkshire Medical Center, the Berkshire Coalition for Suicide Prevention and the Western chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And their meetings have been sponsored by a grant from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And for a number of years now, they've been sponsoring a conference aimed at suicide prevention. And this year, they decided that it would be great to look at some of the factors that can be protective and build resilience in youngsters in our community.
Okay. So when we're talking about youngsters, how young are we talking about? When do we start to building these factors in our children?
Well, we start to build these factors in our children before they're even born, as a matter of fact. Resilience is a concept of protection for children who have gone through adverse experiences. So adverse experiences can start as early as during pregnancy. So it's a simple concept in some ways. It sort of goes without saying that some people who go through difficult things manage to come out relatively unscathed and healthy and successful, and others don't. So a number of years ago, people started to look into this concept of why is it that some young people, and again, starting at birth, turn out to feel healthier and be more successful in their futures, and why do some of them suffer more? So there are a number of factors in individuals, in families, in communities that can really help protect children from developing difficulties in their later life.
Now, you say that there's a number of factors, so I would imagine you must look at the entire spectrum of things that could happen. So what are some of the major factors that come into play?
Well, some of the major factors, like premature birth, can impart some challenges for youngsters.
In what way? How does that affect them?
Developmentally, they're going to struggle to kind of catch up to where their body wanted to be if it had been born several months earlier. And oftentimes you can remediate those challenges very early in life, but it can start that young. Also, maltreatment of children in childhood is a major factor for adverse outcome in children. So if we can work with families to help families with parenting and with connecting with their children and understanding their children, that can have enormous protective factors. Things like divorce, even natural disasters and community traumas can have adverse effects in children. And so we can support individuals through those kinds of experiences.
So when you're supporting, you're aiming the support really at the families and sort of the support in parenting those early years. And I would imagine you're looking at maybe aiming some of the help toward the children and the young adults as they get toward those sort of risky years, I would imagine.
Right. As children get older and they move into the community, they interact with many people in the community, and individuals in a community can make a huge difference in youngsters' lives. I mean, a young person who can make a connection with a good mentor, who can help them find their talents, see the good in themselves, can just make a huge difference in someone's life.
Now, how is it that we can match folks that can be good mentors up with some of the sort of most at-risk population? Because that's probably the trickiest thing, right? Is finding that good match. Because I know, if you look back in your own life, and I'm sure a lot of listeners and viewers would think the same thing, they look back at that one person and you say, well, it's a good thing, beyond my parents and beyond grandparents and family and stuff, there was this one person that I identified with, and that was the person that made me think I could do X, Y, and Z, and that's why I'm in the career I'm in. I mean, there's a lot of stories like that people think about.
Sure, yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because in families, as you mentioned, there's also extended family members who can also play an important role in children's lives. But in the community, there are some natural occurring venues, such as schools and community centers and religious buildings or associations or communities, things like that. So those are often some of the natural places where kids go. It's where their lives are. It's part of their natural history. So they go to school, they go to the community center, they may get involved in a sport in the afternoons from the community, and it's often in those places where youngsters will find the mentors who will be helpful to them.
Yeah. Now, is it also difficult in some respects in the community because, being a parent of what used to be small children, and now I have 2 teenagers. You know, the idea that you're always sort of letting go a little bit, and you want to feel like you can control everything, but at the same time, as they grow up, you want them to have some of those experiences, but you also want to still protect them somehow and know that the experiences that they're having are the positive ones and the ones that will lead to good outcomes instead of bad. So, you know, do you have advice for parents on that?
Right. Well, I think parents can be very aware. I mean, I think parents are aware of, you know, who their children are with and what they're doing, and can get an idea of whether they're, you know, the communities that they're in seem to be pro-social communities that are doing positive and good things. But you raise another very important point, which is in order for individuals to build resilience, as we grow older, we do need to have some more autonomy and sense of self-efficacy and independence. And without that, people will not be resilient either. So, you know, we try to put expectations and responsibilities on children, educate them, and hope that we've sort of taught them as best we can and that they'll make good choices. But if we hold them back from having some autonomy, that may have an effect on their sense of self and their own sense of competency.
Yeah, I would think a certain amount of confidence is needed going forward and thinking, okay, you know, I see the path here and I can take it and I can do it. And, you know, there's always that pushback from kids. They don't, after a while, they don't want you, you know, sort of looking over everything they do. But at the same time, as a parent, especially of teenagers, I would imagine that's a critical thing.
Very critical. Very critical. There's you mentioned a couple of very significant words. There's a pediatrician from University of Pennsylvania who, you know, in a quick way says there are 4 C's. There are 4 C's that we want to give to our children to help them be resilient. And the first and most important is the connection that we make in our families. Then it's good communication, a sense of comfort, so a sense of security and predictability, and lastly, a sense of competence, a way to sort of feel that we're comfortable to go out into the world and manage somehow.
We're speaking with Dr. Brenda Butler from BMC, who will be are you leading the conference, or are you a participant in it? I didn't get a chance to ask you.
I am leading the conference. We have 2 other excellent participants.
Okay.
Dr. John Miner, who is a psychoanalyst and a psychiatrist who works at Williams College with young adults and has been in private practice for many years. And Dr. Christopher Overtree, who is a clinical psychologist from University of Massachusetts, who has expertise in youth and resiliency in youth and helping youngsters communicate and have positive communication and problem-solving skills. So it should be very interesting. We're also going to have a youth panel at the end of the day, so we can hear from some youngsters themselves, because the truth of the matter is, if we're going to communicate with young people, we really have to listen. You know, we have to listen to them and hear from them who they are and what they need and how they feel. It's very important to see them.
And again, the conference is called Building Resilience and Protective Factors for the Youth in Our Community. It's happening on February 1st at the Pittsfield Country Club. I believe you have a flyer for
I do.
So we'll hold that up here for the benefit of our TV audience.
I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it much on the TV. It just sort of gives you some information about how to register.
Well, let's talk about that. How do people register and get involved with that?
People can contact Sarah Peroni at Berkshire Medical Center at area code 413-447-2987, or email her at speroni, Perrone, at bhs1.org. And
the people who would be good candidates for registering for this conference, who are the folks you'd be looking for?
So we're really hoping that anyone who feels they want to learn more about this, because anyone could be a mentor, would come. We expect that many people from the mental health community will come, schools, some of the community organizations that work with youth, things like that, I imagine. Clergy, other spiritual leaders.
Yeah. And your background at BMC, I didn't also get a chance to ask you, because we talked a little bit about how you got involved with it, but what do you bring to the table?
I am a child and adolescent psychiatrist,
Okay.
And I am the director of child and adolescent education and outreach. I work at Berkshire Medical Center and at the Breen Center clinically. I see patients in both sites. but I'm also involved in the education of our residents. That I oversee the child and adolescent training of our residents and work in the community in ways that I can.
So certainly you get a chance to listen
Yes.
many times a day, it sounds like. And I would imagine for professionals in your field, it is important to listen. You mentioned the student or the child or sort of panel or roundtable you're going to have as part of the conference. So, and I do get the feeling that sometimes we step back and we sort of think we have the answers to some of this, but it is really important to listen to the kids and their concerns and then be able to turn around and address some of those.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm oftentimes very inspired by young people and their insights and their awareness of what they're experiencing and what they need, and they help guide me every day that I work with them. So, yeah, absolutely.
Is there a critical time in a child's life when, because a lot of this centers around suicide prevention, when parents really ought to be looking for particular signs that they should be worried about, and what are some of those signs? I guess those would be the next questions I would have.
Sure. Suicide rates in adolescents are alarmingly high. It is the third leading cause of death in adolescents. Suicide does occur in pre-adolescence, but at a much lower rate, and is much it's rare in pre-adolescence. So I think adolescence is a key developmental period where youngsters can develop suicidal thoughts and act on those thoughts. And some of the warning signs, clearly depression is a risk factor for suicide. Youngsters who are depressed may look different than what we would assume is a typical depression. They may be more irritable and having more behavioral difficulties and isolate and stop doing fun things that they usually like to do. So it may be harder to recognize because the mood state may not look sad, but just cranky, which, people often think is part of being an adolescent, and it can be.
Yeah.
There are some other risk factors that may have to do with depression in families or previous suicide attempts or suicide in families, substance abuse, things like that.
And I would imagine sometimes it's probably difficult to identify because it may be a gradual thing that families may not notice right away, but noticing some of those signs could be a critical thing, right?
Yeah. It is difficult to recognize because oftentimes you're correct. It is gradual.
Not to mention the fact that everyone has busy lives, and you sort of, knowing being in a family, you cruise through day after day, and you need to get things done, and life has a regular rhythm. But so that's the thing is to know when that's really different and what to do about it. So then, what is a good thing for someone to do if they've noticed some of those signs, and when do you decide that maybe professional attention or treatment is the right path?
I think, again, communication, one of those C's. A good thing to do would be to say, I notice you seem different. I think that sometimes because youngsters will be showing behavioral challenges and be less cooperative and more difficult, we tend to look at that as a behavior and not always as an emotional state. So if you can see through the behavior and say you're not your usual self, can you tell me if there's something wrong? Just sort of reach out, and that could be anybody. That could be family, that could be someone at the school, that could be just a friend who might say, I noticed that something's different about you. And again, it's surprising how often people will be open to sharing that they have in fact been struggling with not feeling well, with having suicidal thoughts, and then I think it's appropriate at that point to refer them to see someone in a mental health setting.
Now, does it get more difficult after a child turns 18? Because then, of course, parents, kids are now essentially adults that, we know that kids that are 18 really are still kids in a lot of ways, and that there's that sort of buffer time between when you're 18 and maybe, 22, 23, those early 20s. When families might identify some of those things, and also maybe some of those things are triggered by other factors, other mental health factors that crop up in those late teen areas. If there are concerned families and that have kids in that range, what would what are some of the best strategies for them to take?
Well, I always like to imagine that before youngsters turn 18, we start to talk to them about turning 18. And I think it really does help. It's a very challenging time in youngsters' lives. It's the transitional time when you're about ready to graduate high school, you're going to turn 18, and you feel that now all of a sudden you're supposed to be an adult, and you're not really ready to be an adult.
Right.
So I think that for any young person, it's great to start to talk about that ahead of time and say, things must be coming up for you. We're just going to problem solve around how we're going to do it, and you kind of put the idea out there. I don't expect you to have all the answers. I don't expect you to take care of everything yourself. We're still here for you with that same balance of, but I understand you want to be doing some of this on your own. So I think if we have those kinds of conversations throughout our children's lives, and especially at certain transitional times, then it's easier when they turn 18 not to hear, I'm 18, you can't tell me what to do anymore.
And that can be a big transitional
Right.
time for a lot of different reasons. I mean,
Right.
these days, under certain economic conditions also, those kids might still be at home for a significant amount of time.
Yes.
And then in other situations, they might be away from home
Right.
for the very first time. And I would imagine some of those situations may also trigger some of the issues that you're going to be talking about at your conference.
Right, absolutely. Both of them can be very challenging experiences, and people have to work together to try to find a new normal, a new balance of we all live together, and we have to be respectful of one another, but you're your own person, and also just deal with the anxieties that we have when our children leave home and go out on their own for the first time. Yeah.
Definitely was easier changing diapers than having teenagers. Let's say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
John Kroll, wherever you are, take advantage of it now.
Right. Yes,
Well,
right.
we're running out of time here in the last few minutes. We'll just reiterate to folks that there's the conference, and it's called Building Resilience and Protective Factors for the Youth in Our Community. And it's on February 1st at Pittsfield Country Club. And what time on February 1st?
The conference runs from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And actually, it's Berkshire Hills Country Club.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Berkshire
Get
Hills
that right.
Country Club, 50 Benedict Road,
Very good.
from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on that Friday.
Okay. So if folks are interested in that, and if you want to register for the conference, is there a charge to go?
Yes, the conference is $30 if you pre-register, and $40 at the door.
Okay, there you go. So, folks, this is your chance. And how do we get that registration again?
So
We'll get
again,
the
you
contact
can
information.
contact Sarah Perrone, SPERRONE at bhs1.org, or 413-447-2987.
Very good.
Thanks.
Dr. Butler, we appreciate you being here this morning. Good luck with the conference. And it sounds like a very interesting and important conversation to be having with the community. So we appreciate you coming in and sharing that with us today.
Thank you very much.
All right, you bet. We have Jen Smith coming up in the second half of the hour, as Good Morning Pittsfield will return after this.
Now there was a time when you loved me so. I couldn't be wrong. Now you need to know. See, I've been a
right, it's 8 o'clock on Thursday, January 10th, 2013. You're listening to Good Morning Pittsfield on the Brave FM, 89.7 WTBR FM Pittsfield. You're also watching us actually on Access Pittsfield Channel 16, a service of PCTV. I'm your guest host for this morning, Sean Sayre, and Jen Smith from the Berkshire Eagle is on her way in for the 8 o'clock hour. We'll be discussing all the issues happening in and around Pittsfield and on her beat, which is generally education, but a lot of other things that Jen Smith covers at the Berkshire Eagle. So we'll have a great conversation with her. And first, we will do a little bit of the news.
WTBR News.
And with the support of the Berkshire Eagle. 6 candidates are in the running for the city's next school superintendent. The Superintendent Screening Committee has selected 6 semifinalists who will be invited for interviews next week. The ad hoc panel selections came from a pool of 18 candidates during a closed-door session on Tuesday night. Quote, "We didn't have a set number of candidates to choose," said committee chairwoman Kathleen Amuso. Quote, "I think these 6 are the ones that we really want to interview." The 9-member committee will also meet in executive session on January 16 and 17 and interview 3 superintendent hopefuls each night. Under the state's open meeting law, only the finalists' names are made public. Finalists will be questioned in an open session of the Pittsfield School Committee. The screening committee plans to submit a list of at least 3 finalists to the school committee on January 23rd. Amuso said her group has a strong field of candidates from which to choose. At least one is a finalist for another school superintendent's position. Quote, "The screening committee is very pleased with the applicants we have at this time," she said. Quote, "It's early in the year, so people looking to be a superintendent are the cream of the crop." Pittsfield's initial superintendent search was conducted last spring, well after nearly 45 school districts in Massachusetts were in the midst of or had completed their own searches. The school committee opted to start the search over again when it yielded only 1 finalist in May. And the Governor's Council has scheduled a hearing early next month in Boston to consider the nomination of a Pittsfield attorney for an Associate Justice position at Southern Berkshire District Court. Michael J. McCarthy, a former Pittsfield City Solicitor and Assistant District Attorney in Berkshire County, was renominated by Governor Deval Patrick last week. McCarthy's original nomination to the judge's post in Great Barrington was quashed in September. The Governor's Council failed to confirm him after a 3-3 vote. Lieutenant Governor Timothy Murray, who could have broken the tie, was out of the country on a trade mission and not available to cast a deciding vote. This year, the 8-member Governor's Council, which reviews and confirms gubernatorial nominations for the court, among other duties, has 4 new members as a result of the November election. The council will meet on McCarthy's nomination February 6th at 12:30 p.m. in Boston. Following a hearing on a nomination, the council normally announces its decision 1 week later. Michael J. Albano of Longmeadow, who now represents the Western Mass District 8 on the council, was elected on November 6th and said he will support McCarthy's nomination. Well, from the Berkshires to Boston, households struggling to pay their energy bills this winter can now access the Massachusetts Good Neighbor Energy Fund. The fund provides a $350 stipend to income-eligible individuals and families during the heating season. Organizers say they hope to dole out a total of $650,000 to more than 2,000 households across the state. Quote, without assistance from the fund, many of the people we serve wouldn't be able to make their monthly utility payments, that according to Major David E. Kelly, the divisional commander of the Massachusetts Salvation Army, which administers the fund. Local residents can apply to the fund through the Salvation Army Corps on West Street in Pittsfield and on River Street in North Adams. The application process officially began on Wednesday, according to Salvation Army officials. Quote, "People start inquiring in September," said Major Ralph Hansen, commander of the North Adams Salvation Army Corps. Quote, "I expect the numbers will be higher this year. In fact, they get higher every year." The Energy Assistance Program is funded through Western Mass Electric Company, National Grid, Berkshire Gas Company, and other participating utilities. Utility customers can donate to the fund when paying their monthly bill online at magoodneighbor.org or by calling 800-SAL-ARMY. Retired TV personality Gene Shalit's misdemeanor charge of operating negligently to endanger after he drove his car into a utility pole and up against a Housatonic Street residence in Lenox on October 24th has been continued until April 2nd, when it will be dismissed. The agreement between Police Chief Stephen O'Brien and Shalit's attorney Leonard H. Cohen was reached and approved during a magistrate's hearing to determine probable cause regarding the charges. Clerk Magistrate Thomas Bartini presided at the Southern Berkshire District Court in Great Barrington on Wednesday afternoon. The chief acknowledged that for the charges to be dismissed, Shallot will have to abide by the safety condition attached to the agreement. Describing Shallot's demeanor during the court appearance, O'Brien said that he was, quote, very appropriately concerned about the incident and very remorseful that it had occurred. He understood an error was made. At the closed-door court hearing, Shallot, who's 86, quote, indicated that he will have someone else drive him until April 2nd, Cohen told the Eagle. After that time, his driving status, quote, will have to be addressed, said Cohen, adding that the Stockbridge resident's license had not been revoked or suspended. And no one was elected to the Hall of Fame this year, the Baseball Hall of Fame, that is. When voters closed the doors to Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and Sammy Sosa, they also shut out everybody else. For only the second time in 4 decades, baseball writers failed to give any player the 75% required for induction to Cooperstown, sending a powerful signal that stars of the steroids era will be held to a different standard. All of the awards and accomplishments collected over long careers by Bonds, Clemens, and Sosa could not offset suspicions that those feats were boosted by performance-enhancing drugs. Voters also denied entry Wednesday to fellow newcomers Craig Biggio, Mike Piazza, and Curt Schilling, along with holdovers Jack Morris, Jeff Bagwell, and Lee Smith. Among the most honored players of their generation, these standouts won't find their images among the 300 bronze plaques on the oak walls in Cooperstown, where, at least for now, the doors appear to be bolted shut on anyone tainted by performance-enhancing drugs. So there you have that.
Berkshire weather.
For more information on the stories you've heard here, BerkshireEagle.com. Today in the Weather Center, sunny, high near 38. Tonight, mostly clear, a low around 15. And then Friday, tomorrow, a chance of rain, freezing rain and sleet in the morning, and then a chance of rain later on. Mostly cloudy with a high near 39. A chance of precip is 40% tomorrow on Friday. And we're hoping to see Jen Smith here in the Nook here in the 8 o'clock hour as Good Morning Pittsfield continues after this. Welcome back to Good Morning Pittsfield here on the Brave FM 89.7 WTBR FM Pittsfield. You're also watching us on Access Pittsfield, a service of PCTV. I'm your guest host for this morning, Sean Sayre, and filling in for John Kroll, who will be back to the show tomorrow, and welcoming Jen Smith from the Berkshire Eagle here to the show. Good morning, Jen. How are you?
Good morning, Sean. I have to apologize for running a little late this morning.
Oh, you're right on time. Like I said, it was right on cue.
I was listening while I was on my way in. I was like, maybe I'll just let him read the entire newspaper. I mean, he's doing a fine job.
That would be difficult because I actually don't bring the entire newspaper with me. So
why not?
I just read the first 4 stories again. That's all.
Oh, goodness. But yes, thank you.
So you've been busy, I understand.
I have been.
And the 413 is in today's Berkshire Eagle.
Yes,
so,
it is Thursday.
So what's up with that? What do you got there?
So I haven't actually seen the physical paper today because, as some of you know, I commute from North County. So, of course, like every time I'm in a hurry to get somewhere, I get stuck behind that person who goes 35 miles an hour the whole way.
The law-abiding citizen, you mean, that's driving 30?
Yeah,
yes,
not in a 55 zone. But
no, I know. It's very difficult. That's a tough road, too.
I can tell you that for myself, back in the Berkshires After Dark rotation, I decided to go. I'd been getting some emails. I get a lot of emails from bands, and I always get emails from T-Bone Daddy, which is a blues rock band that's local. And then when I was doing my New Year's Eve roundup, I got a band email from this band called Dysfunction, which I hadn't really heard of. They're Dysfunction with an F-U-N-K in the middle, the Funkin' Dysfunction.
Nice.
And lo and behold, they were playing a double bill at the GEAA, also known as the Back Nine Grill, also known more fondly as the A. So I went there on Saturday night so I could
now,
check out these bands.
have you been to the GEAA before to check out bands?
I had not in a long time.
Yeah.
I think I
I drive by there every day, pretty much, and
I do a
sort
lot.
of get the update on who's playing there that weekend, and it's kind of a hotbed of local band activity.
It really is.
It?
I mean, I've seen not only do they have bands, they also have live DJs there. Sometimes they do open mics, and occasionally I'll see comedy up in their billboard. By the way, if you're looking to figure out who's playing, that's probably the best way is to drive by and look at the billboard. I actually tried calling the other day to find out what they'd have for the week, and they weren't able to say because it wasn't up yet, and I'm assuming up means up on the board.
On the board, yeah.
So whoever does that, they're the gatekeeper. But, it's not like the fanciest venue I've ever been to by any means, but, I will give them a lot of credit. I forget how big it is in there. It's a really large space. They've got probably one of the biggest dance floors in Berkshire County, partially because they are affiliated with a golf course. I'm assuming they have a lot of functions there and things like that. But they fit both bands. Instead of breaking down a setup, they just set up both bands and then, switched to a light arrangement to highlight each band as they played, and they did alternating sets. And then I wasn't there, but I saw photos and video later, but they did a joint kind of performance too, and there was a lot of people dancing, so it was a really good time. I was surprised.
I assume that the place was a rockin'.
It was. Not as crazy. I've been there a couple times, and I think, again, because of the golf course nature, it's busier in the summer than maybe the off season. But there are definitely still like a good, I'd say 50, almost 60 people there on Saturday night. By the time, the later it got in the evening, the more and more people filtered in. So don't go around like 9 o'clock when I first did, there was only like maybe a dozen people there.
So things don't heat up then.
But around 10 o'clock, that number had like doubled, and by like 10:30, like I started counting about 40 people there. So
now there are a good number of venues for live music here in Berkshire County. For if you like, rock and roll is not dead by any means.
No, not at all.
Even though music in general has changed a lot in the last 30 or 40 years for people that have gone out and gone to bands. The type of music that's on the radio today, probably going to be difficult to go listen to a rock band someday play it, but the kind of stuff that you still hear live, in live venues in the Berkshires is the stuff that some of us people of a certain age remember a few years ago.
It's funny. I was in the Lighthouse not too long ago at the Boys and Girls Club, and they have photos of when bands used to play there, and now the Lighthouse at the club is actually catering more towards the middle school crowd. So they actually have a dinner and movie night coming up this Friday night, I think, and they're doing skate nights there. So just really putting the club in the kids' hands in that respect.
Yeah.
But
did you get a chance to go to the Lighthouse reunion concert by any chance?
I did not. I wasn't in town, but I heard that it was a great lineup of bands.
Yeah.
Bands that I used to hear played in the area a lot before. From there, Woody's Roadhouse out in Washington.
Yeah.
A lot of good stuff. But I think now. I think local venues, whether you're a bar owner, a restaurant owner, or just happen to have the space, they're taking advantage of the resources that we have in the Berkshires in terms of talent. There's a lot of musical talent and a lot of performing arts talents here, and it's like, why not give them a venue? And it's good for your business because it brings maybe a different crowd in. Maybe people don't want to necessarily buy a sandwich, but they want to listen to, their friend's band.
Sure.
And I see that, it's starting to trickle down more into the youth population. So for teenagers, there's a few more venues. I know the Marketplace Cafe is pretty good here in Pittsfield in terms of giving young people a venue. They have a teen series. And I've seen places like Juice and Java do that.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you point that out, and because it does seem like there are fewer venues for kids, and we think about the Lighthouse in the 60s and early 70s, and that seems to have been a magnet for teenagers, young 20s, area like that, where that's the place to go, and those were the things to do. And now when we talk about live music and venues, we're really talking about people of a slightly greater age who are going to enjoy those kind of things.
Yeah, I got a Facebook invite and an email directly this week too from Barrington Stage Company, and in their second space they have a space downstairs which they call Finn's Cabaret, and they're actually going to be doing their first youth open mic. So if you're a young person out there, you probably shouldn't be listening right now because you're probably in class.
That's right.
But for parents out there who know your kid is pretty musically or talented, or maybe a spoken word poet, definitely check out the Barrington Stage Company website, or look for them on Facebook. Learn the details about signing up and getting yourself registered. It's really cool. I think it would be cool if I were 14 being able to be like, yeah, I played Barrington Stage. What? So I think that's really cool of them to offer up that space and the opportunities.
Absolutely. We're speaking with Jen Smith here from the Berkshire Eagle on Good Morning Pittsfield on 89.7 WTBR FM Pittsfield. You're also watching us if you happen to be tuned in to channel 16 on Time Warner Cable in Pittsfield, Dalton, or Richmond. You're watching us on Access Pittsfield, which is a service of PCTV. So in today's Berkshire Eagle, Jen, you also have a story, I think, in the B section, I want to say. Although you haven't seen the paper, so I'm putting you on the spot there.
I know, I'm such a terrible reporter.
And it was about the plight of homeless vets.
Yeah. So yesterday, Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray, during an annual Veterans Luncheon at the State House, announced that between January 2010 and January 2012, the homeless veterans population in Massachusetts dropped about 26%, which seems like a pretty significant number. From last year to this year, or I should say from 2011 to 2012, it was a little bit more marginal, it was about 7%, but from that 2010 year to the 2012 year, it was 26%. Now that data itself, for those data junkies out there, it comes from a one-night count of veterans in shelters.
Okay.
So that is a factor.
So those are the homeless veterans that we can count.
Yes,
essentially,
exactly.
is what it comes down to.
And so there's definitely peripherals as well. But there's important things to look at when you look at those figures. One, in talking, looking with both what the state was saying and talking with local people. Yesterday I talked to Roseanne Fieri, who's a Veteran Services officer over at Pittsfield City Hall, and I spoke with Jack Downing, who heads the Soldier On project, which has two housing sites, both a shelter and their apartment-style buildings, on West Housatonic Street in Pittsfield, and they also have a shelter out in Leeds as well. And what they said is they agree. They agree that the homeless vet population has declined over the years. They attribute that to just more services from just greater outreach. Specifically here in Berkshire County, there's more collaboration across agencies, not only just providing housing, but providing ways to have affordable housing, to give veterans more employment opportunities so that they don't have to rely on shelters, but they can be self-sustaining. They can go out, get a job, and afford their own, rental or buying a home.
Yeah. It's interesting that the numbers have declined, or at least the numbers that they can point to have declined over the last couple of years, considering the economic circumstances that we're in. You would think that actually the numbers would be maybe increasing, and it would be something that you couldn't keep up with. Well,
at the start of the kind of recession back in 2008, there was a new veteran service program that came out. It was a federal program from the HUD, Housing Urban
Development.
Department. And see, when you're in radio journalism, you learn all these acronyms, and they're all swimming around in your head.
Well, whenever you're dealing with government, you're going to have an alphabet soup no matter what.
Yep.
It's one of those things.
And there's a program called VASH, and of course I can't remember it, but it's a service, a housing service program that basically helps vets, gives them vouchers to help cover their first insecurity so that they can make rent payments a little bit better. And so they can get by a little bit more. So that program's been installed for the past 4 years, and that is also a great help, I guess. When I was talking to Roseanne, she said it's definitely a heavily utilized service, and the government actually just threw more money into that pot. The rub, though, with this whole issue, talking with Jack Downing, was that he highlighted the fact that now with the current government drawdown of military troops who will be returning, there will be an influx across the country of veterans returning home. So it's up to these veteran service organizations to be ready.
Yeah, I would think that's going to be a significant challenge and perhaps even a burden in some ways, because you'll have waves of people coming home with new, fresh experiences that they are working through and dealing with. And so you're not only working with older veterans of previous wars from the past, 40 years, but you're also dealing with something they're basically fresh off, very foreign battlefields in a lot of ways. So that must present new challenges to organizations
absolutely.
like those.
And that's what, when I was talking with Jack Downing, that's exactly kind of what he referred to. Not only will there be an influx of people, and he said that particularly the Western Mass region may not feel that as much because not as many reservists from this area were called to service. So there may be we might not see it as drastic of a spike. But what he did say is that, especially a lot of the veterans who are returning are younger. Some of them may have families. And right now, he said about, at least in terms of Soldier On, about 85 to 90% of the people that they deal with, the veterans that they deal with, are individuals, but 10% are families, and that number may be growing. Also, just looking at the needs of these veterans returning, they want to get back to school as quick as they can so they can get the skills they need to get into workplace, or they want to just go directly to the workplace. And so it's up to these agencies who are charged with the task of helping with transitions to really get on it and try to rethink about how quickly can we make this transition happen for them, because otherwise the greater kind of gap period that there is, the greater the struggles ultimately, and that again cycles back to just a greater burden on services overall.
Well, it's good to see, I think, that there's a greater awareness now maybe than there was following the Vietnam War and when soldiers returned from that war. So I think in general, the country has made a 180 in terms of supporting and helping veterans when they come home and understanding, the amount of effort and things that they put on the line for all of us. It's really a different atmosphere now.
I've had the great fortune of talking to some of the, senior veterans over the years, and I think because they went through that experience, especially the Vietnam vets, they're big advocates for the new guys coming home, making sure and actually really reaching out and saying, get yourself taken care of, let us help you, because we don't want to see you slip through the cracks like we did.
Yeah. We're speaking with Jen Smith from the Berkshire Eagle, and that story is in today's Berkshire Eagle, so you should maybe think about taking a look at that, picking up a copy perhaps. And you're listening to Good Morning Pittsfield here on the Brave FM, 89.7 WTBR, also watching us on Channel 16, Access Pittsfield, which is a service of PCTV. And Jen, you had some very unique experiences about a month ago, and it's, I would imagine, sort of a professional milestone for you as a reporter. You spent a good amount of time down in Newtown, Connecticut, and I don't know if you've already spoken with John on the program about that, but I was kind of curious about, first of all, how did you get the assignment to go there, and and how did it morph into, because we're a couple hours away, into sort of a longer term assignment for you?
So both, it was about Friday afternoon on the 14th of December, and my colleague Adam Police and I were in the newsroom, and our managing editor, Kevin Moran, approached both of us. Adam happened to be working the night shift and, I have a lot of experience working with schools and youth, and we were approached about going down. It was voluntary opportunity, and at first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to, but then, I realized I am fluent in a lot of these issues, so I thought I could be of help. Our New England newspapers is part of, which is owns the Berkshire Eagle, is partnered, or our parent organization is Media News Group, which is part of Digital First Media. The other DFM division is the Journal Register company. So Journal Register owns a lot of papers in Connecticut. So essentially we're sister papers. So Adam and I got assigned to the New Haven Register, which really needed all hands on deck from a journalistic standpoint, because there were so many people involved, essentially an entire town and then some.
Sure.
This was just a very huge issue, and so many unknowns that day.
And we're all familiar with the, sort of what unfolded and what happened. And I'm sure a lot of people followed it very closely over the Christmas break and things like that. But what was the atmosphere like sort of behind the lines in the press corps? Was it sort of the crazy throng that you might expect that it might be, or was it a little more somber? What was it like?
Well, I think, and I hope, John can get Adam here on the show, because we both had very different experiences. My area is, I like research. So the first night that I was there, I got assigned to work with another reporter there, trying to profile Nancy Lanza, who was the mother of the assailant. And so I was primarily based, for my first 2 days there. I was there for the weekends. I was there for 3 days. My first assignments, I spent most of my time at the Register. Adam spent a lot of time in the field. He actually had to go and cover services. There was, in Newtown, there was an area, a press camp set up. And that was very insane in terms of just the sheer numbers of people. And every day there were more and more media outlets. We were fortunate because we could drive right here from the Berkshires, a very central location, to pretty much any major hub on the East Coast, whether you're headed to Boston, New York, down to New Haven or Hartford. Right. So it was a quick, relatively quick drive in the car. I mean, I hit no traffic. But, other places, there was one point where I had to look at, where the Newtown, the Sandy Hook Elementary School would be transitioning into this former school building in Monroe, the town of Monroe. And so I remember going there, and I was out in the field, and I drove down to Monroe, and I'm sitting in the Monroe police station waiting to talk to a lieutenant who was organizing plans. And it was myself and this other guy, and it turned out he was a USA Today reporter from Washington. So it was just really interesting to see, who was there and whatnot. But then, at the same time, it was a big lesson, and just
I was going to ask
a reminder of ethics and how you approach such a sensitive issue. Every family was assigned a state trooper, and to kind of help maintain the privacy of the family, which I think was an excellent move on Newtown's behalf. They were everything was, from my experience and my vantage point, was very, very streamlined.
Because I would think most of the press are going to be respectful, but at the same time, when
you have
get a big
to
event
do.
like that, that's your job, and you're assigned to
and
get whatever
whenever I've learned from, this is heading into my 8th year at the paper. I've learned over the years that you treat people the way that you want to be treated, and it's also our job to kind of remind people that we do have a job to do. And I don't like it sometimes. I don't like that I had to talk to people at probably one of the worst moments in their life. And at the same time, you want to be accurate, and you want to be able to get full details. And you also tell that person you're communicating that, they're the best person to tell their story. And, I find that goes a long way. It just shows respect. And if someone doesn't want to talk to me, I'm personally the type of reporter who won't push that. Some do, and I think there was a lot of controversy and a lot of talk, and still is and still will be a lot of talk about how the media what their role and how their presence affected things. But I saw a lot of good practice down there.
Great. Jen Smith, it's been great talking to you. Thanks for sharing your experiences.
Absolutely.
With that.
Thanks for having
very
me.
interesting. And we'll talk to you again.
Thank you.
Pick up that paper today, folks, and read her story on homeless vets. And